By the end of this lecture, you are going to learn how to create a brand new user account with an email and password using Firebase authentication. The first step is to enable the email password sign-in method inside Firebase authentication. Open up the browser and go to console.firebase.google.com and log in with your Gmail account. As you can see, I am already logged in, so it took me straight to the Firebase dashboard where I can see all the Firebase projects I created earlier. Now I am going to choose my first Firebase project. Once I'm inside the project, choose authentication from the sidebar. If you don't see it here, select build and choose authentication. Once you are in the authentication page, click on the sign in method tab. In there you can see all of the sign-in providers that the Firebase authentication offers. To enable the email password sign-in method, click on the email password button, then toggle the enable switch and click save. Within a few seconds, you can see the email password sign-in provider has been added with the status enabled. At this stage, I have successfully enabled the email password sign-in method. The second step is to import the Firebase authentication module in order to create a new user account. Now I'm going to import the Firebase authentication module via CDN, Content Delivery Network, which is basically Firebase authentication JavaScript file hosted on the Firebase domain. To find the URL of the authentication module, go to the browser and type https://firebase.google.com/web/learn-more-available-libraries. Hit enter, then click on the available Firebase JS SDKs from the CDN link. As you can see, it shows all of the available import statements that we can use. The one I am interested in is authentication. At the time of this recording, it shows the version 10.0.0, and you may see a higher version of it depending on when you watch this lecture. I'm going to select the library reference next to the authentication, then copy everything from import to the ending codes, like so. Come back to the app.js file and paste it at the top, like so. This module has a lot of methods related to authentication, but we need only 2 methods in order to create a new user account. So the first one is getAuth and the second one is create user with email and password method. The getAuth method will create an instance of an authentication object which we need to do any kind of authentication related operations, such as create a new user account, logging into a user account, logging out an user account, and so on. The second method is create user with email and password. This is the one I'm going to use to actually create a new user account in the Firebase authentication page. Let's destructure these methods from the import statement. So inside the curly braces after the keyword import, type getAuth, a uppercase, comma, create user with email and password, like so. The third step is to actually call the create user with email and password method when a user clicks the create account button. The create user with email and password is one of the Firebase authentication methods that will allow you to create a new user account on the Firebase authentication backend directly from the frontend web app. This method will take 3 arguments. The first one is going to be authentication object. The second one is going to be user email. The third one is the user password. So inside the sign up button pressed function, right below the prevent default method, invoke the create user with email and password method, opening closing parenthesis and semicolon. The first argument we need is going to be authentication object. So let's create it using the get auth method that I have imported here. So right below the import statement, type const space auth equals get auth, a uppercase, opening closing parenthesis and semicolon. The get auth method will return an instance of the authentication object, then add the auth object as a first argument inside the parenthesis in here, comma. The second argument is going to be the user provided email. As you can see, I already have a DOM reference for the email input field called email. To get the value from the email input field, all I have to use is the value property on the email input element object. So dot value, comma, let's do the same for the password. Password, which is the password input field that I have declared here, dot value. Now I have provided all the arguments the method needs. The create user with email and password is an asynchronous function that will actually return a promise. So the promise can be either fulfilled or resolved, meaning if everything goes well, it will create a brand new user account, or the promise can be rejected, meaning there is an error creating a user account. To handle the promise, I can either use then catch block or async await syntax. I'm going to use async await syntax in this case because it is more clean and the recommended way of handling a promise these days. In order to handle a promise using async and await, type the await keyword in front of the create user with email and password function like so. As soon as I add the await keyword will convert this asynchronous function to synchronous, meaning that any code after this await line won't be executed until the promise of this function is either resolved or rejected. At this stage, the sign up button pressed function contains an asynchronous function. So in order for the await keyword to work properly, the sign up button function has to be converted into an asynchronous function as well. To do that, all I have to do is to add the async keyword in front of the sign up button pressed function right below the parameter E. Now you know the create user email and password method returns a promise which is either resolved or rejected. But how do we know what the promise actually returns? To figure it out, I'm going to wrap this method with the try catch block. So try opening closing curly braces, catch opening closing parenthesis. I'm going to pass error in there, then opening closing curly braces. Now I'm going to move this function inside the try block. So select, cut and paste it here. The create user with email and password method will return a user credential object that has information about the user account. So I'm going to assign it to a constant called user credential. Now I'm going to console log the user credential object like so. Inside the catch block, I'm going to console log the error as well in case the promise is rejected for some reason. So console log opening closing parenthesis and semicolon inside their error dot code. The fourth and the final step is to run the app and create a new user account. I'm going to right click the index.html file from the project navigator and open up with live server option, which is one of the Visual Studio Code extensions. This will automatically open up the browser and start running the app on the local server with the port 5500 in my case. You may have a different port number, that's okay. Then I'm going to open up the developer console. I'm going to type an email and password, then hit create account, and I can see the user credential object in the developer console. When I expand the user credential object, there is a user object. In there, I can see the email that I used to create a user account. Nice. Switch back to the Firebase authentication page. Under the users tab, I can also see the brand new user account has been created with the same email address. At this stage, I have successfully created a brand new user account using email and password in Firebase authentication.